Hello again, do-it-yourselfers. Terry Peterman, the Internet Electrician, down here on Playa Venado in beautiful Costa Rica, Guanacaste. We're at a villa called Punta Paraiso. It's friends of ours. And here we are going to do some connecting of a container that right now is going to be just used for storage, but down the road it's going to be a little villa. So stay tuned, let's get started. All right, so here's where it's all going to start from, the power to this container. Here's what they call a registro, or a caja in the ground here. The power comes from the street out of a meter as per usual. You might have figured that out. And then they run it underground and they bring it up in all these little registros, and then they splice on the different buildings. Here we've got the container home, then we've got the garage and a casita here, and then the main house. And casita and the container is going to be on 1 meter and the house and the garage on another. So we're going to splice into the casita power. Now we've excavated this ditch here, so I'm going to give you a close-up of the registro. Bit of a tangled web there, but we've got bigger cables that are the feed for the house, and the garage, like I said, is spliced off of that. Then there's some smaller feeders coming from the other service that we're taking. So the casita, which is right over here, and this new container are going to be on the same meter. So what we have in here is some number 6s feeding from the meter to the casita that I'm going to splice into, and like I said, the bigger cables going to the house, and the garage is tapped in here. And we also have a ground rod that the casita is using as a bonding point, or as a grounding point, establishing a new service here. I've decided to just run 3 conductors over to the container, and then we're going to put another ground there and establish another main service at that container home. So I had to pound a ground rod, and then we will bond that panel, and that'll be considered another main service. So here we go. I've got the ditch excavated. I've got the conduit in place. Did all this yesterday. Just used 1.25 inch conduit, plenty large for what we're doing. And then it comes around the corner here. And they had already dug in the conduit here for when they placed the container. So it was coming up the wall here, and they had planned on taking the power out of the garage. But the garage panel was full, had no room, and so instead of changing the panel in there to get more breaker spaces and sub-feed the container, we just decided to establish another service here in the container and run over to the registro and splice in. So 1.25 inch conduit coming from the registro, or the caja, the box. Then it goes back underground, already backfilled. Coming up here, did all this yesterday. Up, had to drill a hole through the bottom of the container to bring the conduit up to the main panel. And there you see my ground wire. And today I had the pleasure of pounding a ground rod. Something I thought I wouldn't have to do since I finished my apprenticeship. But no, you never know when you're going to pound ground rods. So there's the ground rod. My number 6 ground is here, ready to be spliced onto that, tied onto that with a ground rod clamp. Let's go inside. Okay, so there's a drain hole that was in the back of the container with a little rubber gupper there that I've run the ground through. We can seal that up with expanding foam. And there's my 1.25 inch conduit coming into the bottom of the container, and here it is coming into the floor of the container. I'm going to tie wrap that ground wire to the back of the conduit. The container here will eventually be strapped and the inside walls finished. They're already insulated because this was a reefer container, so we just put the panel on the surface here, and they'll be framing that in. So here we go. I've got the wires ready to tie into the main panel, and then I'll splice into the feeds over in that registro, that caja, or box as we might say. And I've just started to run the conduit, so here I'm just dropping down to a switch box. That's going to just turn on one light for now so they can see what they're doing, because as I mentioned, it's just going to be storage for now. Drop that conduit down to another receptacle here for convenience, power, and then we're going to run a run of conduit all the way down the container around the 12-14 inch height, and we're going to go up to a light, just a LED strip light, 4-foot strip light that's going to go in the center of this nice white finished ceiling, so that'll give them enough light to see what they're doing. And that conduit will carry on, and we will go up the wall at about the 3/4 length of the container, so about 30 feet down there. It's going to go up on the wall, and that's where an air conditioning unit is going to go. So let's get back to work. Okay, so with all my connectors here, I'm going to start this conduit run. Probably use the bottom hole here, or maybe the top one, and we'll go all the way down 10 feet for no other reason, just because I don't have to cut it, and there's no real plan here yet. So we'll go down there with 10 feet, we'll stick another box there. May or may not put a receptacle on it for now. Dan doesn't think we need it yet until they decide the actual electrical layout when they turn this into a container home. So we'll probably just drop a box off there with a blank cover on it, and we'll carry on, put our feeds in there for power. We're going to use 2 number 10s for the AC and a ground, of course. And then we'll probably bring some 12 gauge wire down through here just for spares, and 2, of course, a color and a white and a ground going up for the light. That'll come off the switch leg of the switch. Okay, it's a little dark back in here, but I've just about got all my conduit run along like I talked about, to box along near the floor. At the end here, I've got a 90 going up to a box for the air conditioner. I'll show you in a bit. So I'll just tuck the wires in there and leave them inside the box. So this conduit is going up to the light fixture box. So we just have to put in a couple straps here. I like to landmark off a rib or something on the container wall rather than a level, because you don't know that the container is perfectly level, and what you're going to see is the wall, anything that's on the wall that'll kind of tell you if you're level or not. So I'm going to take it off of this rib. I got about 12 3/4 inch to center, so about halfway up here, 12 3/4 to center. And I've got my conduit 1-hole strap here. So sometimes, like I've mentioned before, in Costa Rica, you've got to improvise a little bit. We don't have rigid conduit straps, we have EMT 1-hole. So you got to just bend them out a little bit to make them work. Put my strap in place. These are stainless steel walls, so I've got to punch a bit of a starter hole with a screwdriver that I don't like. It's been Phillips screwdriver, and the point has been stripped, so it's kind of useless as a screwdriver, but not bad as a punch. Again, I looked at the hardware store here for a good punch, and they don't have one, so screwdriver it is. Okay, there's my strap on the riser. Level that strap up a little. Okay, got a 90 going up on the ceiling, so we're just gonna short chunk of pipe to the center of the ceiling here for an octagon box, and then we're gonna mount our strip light in the middle. So with all the conduit pretty much run, I'll just finish up that little section and we'll start pulling wire. Let's just take you on a quick tour of the conduit as we have it. Panel, down to a switch box, down to a receptacle, all the way along to another one. A lot of stuff in the way here. Over to that box, we'll put another receptacle there. That's the conduit I just worked on. Finish it off to an octagon in a minute here. And then on we go. And there's my 90 up. Another strap. And I'm just going to put the wires for the AC in that box and put a blank plate on it. Okay, so I've got all my conduit run boxes in place. Now I'm going to start pulling wire, and then I'll cut this whole panel in. So let me get all the wires in place and I'll explain exactly what I've pulled. But basically I'm going to come down with a power feed to the switch, out of the switch, down to one receptacle, down the line to another receptacle, and we'll cap off the spare boxes with blank covers. Then we also have two wires, two number 10s that are going to go down all the way to the end in that junction box to be ready for the air conditioner unit down the road. And of course then a ground wire's got to go through all this PVC conduit to give a proper earth ground to everything. So I'm going to get the wires ready to pull in, and I'll come back with all the wires in place and start hooking things up. Okay, look way up, and I got all my wires pulled. Got my red and blue number 10 along with a green number 12 going up to that box ready for an AC unit. And down the wall, 90-degree bend. Got a couple more straps I want to add to these conduits. But here is going to be a receptacle. So I've got my wires pulled here. Lighting isn't that good. Let me try to get you a little better light. Okay, so a little better light there, I think. Not great, but anyway, you've got the two 10s and the ground heading on through over to where we just came from. And then we've got the switched leg black, white, and a green going up, 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 up. Across the ceiling and into a junction box where I've tied on this LED strip light. Okay, so that's a black, a white, and a green. They're all going to get spliced here in this box. And in fact, they are spliced right now. So got green ground wire coming in from the panel, out to the AC and up to the light, all spliced together along with the pigtail here, ready to tie a receptacle on. And then leaving a little bit of a loop of the other wires through that box, just in case you need it, or if you ever want to. You never know why you leave a little slack in a box, you just do. You don't want to pull it straight through. Now, over to this one. Here again, we're going to put on a receptacle. So we've got a black coming in, black going out, white going in, white going out, green going in, green going out. So we'll tie that onto a receptacle. And back to the panel. Here again, black coming in, black going out, white in and out, green in and out. Little loop again on the two number 10s for the AC. And then also a little loop on the switch leg wire. Up here to the switch box. Got our red and blue number 10s in the back of that box. I'm not going to leave any slack in this one. The neutral for the regular general purpose circuit here. The ground, going to have to pull a loop into that. Splice onto our switch. Whenever there's a switch with a ground terminal provided, you have to tag it off to a ground. Then we have our power coming in from the panel, which will be on a 20 amp breaker, 12 gauge wire. In and out of here, because we need hot to carry on to the receptacles, unswitched. And then this is that second black wire that's going to be on the switch leg side of the switch for that light. And then I got to cut in my panel, splice it onto the incoming supply conductors, tag off my ground clamp with the ground rod with a ground clamp, and the number 6 I've got running out to it, and we're done. So we're getting close to the end. I'm going to start putting on these devices. Alright, so just ready to put on my last receptacle here, closest to the panel. Using these Eagle brand, they're readily available here. They are approved. They are approved by all the accredited agencies that are necessary, even though down here on the coast we probably won't have an inspection of this. But they are terminals like this. So they just have the set screw where you can put two wires in beside each other, and they use the same clamp to tighten those in. And you know, they're not like we're used to back home with terminals that you can either use the straight in crimp type or clamp type terminals like this, or you can bend a nice loop in a solid conductor around the terminals and clockwise wrap it around and tighten it. But you know what, if you're using stranded wire and you've got these smaller boxes, I don't actually mind these at all. You can get a good splice on them. You've got, like I say, both wires under the same lug. You can tighten them down nice and tight. It's designed for in and out wiring. So I don't mind using these at all, especially with stranded conductors. I hate trying to put a stranded conductor around the terminal. Just doesn't work. So cut these wires all the same length. Strip them all with my number 12's T-stripper. Now, you don't want these very long, only about a 1/4 inch long for these type of terminals. So I'm going to strip all 6 here. Okay, now you've just got a ground terminal with an in and out. So as you can see, the screw, I don't know if you can see that, but the screw has a center, it goes into the center of a bar. So it's the same bar that pulls down on both conductors in a nice tight little hole like that. And I think it gives you a good splice. So, and like I said, if you're going to start using pigtails and morettes in these tiny boxes they have here, you're going to have a lot of fun trying to stuff all that into the box. So we're going to use these as designed. Feed through, in and out. There you can see my ground in the terminal. Tighten that screw down nice and tight. Wiggle. And then give it another snugging and pull. Tug test always. That's a good splice. Here's the neutral. Same thing. Back it off so you can see it's opened up inside there. One neutral in, the other neutral in, and again tighten it down. Wind's kicked up a little bit here. We kind of transgressed from the wet season, the rainy season, to the dry season, and with that, usually later in the season comes some winds, papagayos they call them, but it seems to be a little windy in the last couple days, but it's sunshine and warm, so I think we're in the dry season. And the reason people come to Costa Rica for vacation, because from December through to about April, you're almost guaranteed sunny and hot. And hey, if you're coming from the northern climates, that's why you're coming to Costa Rica. Tighten it down good, wiggle. All right, these cover plates just snap off. Now we can neatly tuck these wires back in. And these Eagle receptacles are even the new code required tamper resistant, which in all honesty I quite hate. Of course, that was the reason for the tamper resistant, so you couldn't shove any object into the receptacle. And of course it's a good idea. Safety first. That's what I teach. Do it right, do it safely, and save you money. So just starting these box screws, device screws, with a screwdriver, and then I'll finish them off with my cordless drill. Make sure they're not pinching any wires and it goes tightly into the mounting onto the box the way it's supposed to. And it's not going to pinch any wires in there. Slow down when you get close to being tight so you don't over tighten. There you go. Snap on the cover plate. All right, there we have the switch in place. Same kind of a system, those Eagle devices. And here I've got my panel all cut in. So let's zoom in for a closer look. Okay, let me explain what's happening here in this panel. It's being treated as a main service again, as I said. So we're grounding it here at the container. That's this number 6 ground going out to the ground rod. Now, when we're treating it as a main service, that means we have to have the bonding screw in place. So that's this screw right here. It goes right through the neutral bus bar, right into the panel tub. And I've tied my ground onto that lug, that neutral lugs, as well as where the neutral is coming in going onto the same lug as well on the main here. And then in behind is our ground bar, where we've got the ground wires now for all the branch circuits, which are in essence the same point as the neutral by virtue of that green bonding screw. Okay, now here's our red hot conductor on one side, here's our black hot on the other side. A little hard to see in there with not much light, but trust me, it's there. And then here's our breakers, 30 amp 2-pole with the red and the blue on it, heading over to the future air conditioner. And then the 20 amp single pole here that goes down, jumps off onto the switch, and then carries on to 1, 2, 3 receptacles, and then a switch leg off to the light in the center of the container. So tie on my ground rod, tie into the mains here, and then we can do some checking, see if I hooked everything up correctly. Okay, it's really sunny out here, so I'm not sure you can see this. I'm in the shadow. I think I've got the ground rod in the shadow here. Yes, I do. So let's just bring it out of the shadow. Here's your ground rod clamp. Now, sometimes you may have to cut the top of this ground rod off after you've pounded it. If it's too flattened out, mushroomed out to get that ground clamp over, you might have to cut it off a little, but mine fit. So there you go, you got one set screw, and your ground wire comes in behind, and it's kind of got a V shape at the back of it, so that's where your ground rod wants to be, flush against your copper clad ground rod. Try to bring it around that side so you can see. And then just tighten this bolt tightly down so your ground wire is pressed tightly against the copper clad ground rod, and there's your earth ground. Just got to tighten that down now. And I see I've got a loose strand, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this off and twist those stranded wires together a little bit so one doesn't escape the group here like it did and be loose. So let's just gently give those a twist. Make them act more like one conductor. There we go. Now that one won't get away on us again. As you can see, you want to keep the wire right out in the V of that ground lug and tighten it down. You can hear a gyrocopter overhead. Some tours they run out of Tamarindo and Samara. They fly up and down the coast, giving the tourists a good view of our beautiful Guanacaste Pacific coastline. We're situated here between Nosara and Tamarindo. Beach right here is called Playa Venado. And then there's Playa Junquial, which is the main beach of our little town. And then Playa Blanca, which is right west of where my house is. Okay, that's a good connection. We can cover this in. Okay, so here we are at the registro, the caja, concrete box where all the wires come in. So this is the hot wire, one of the hot wires coming from the meter, the second hot wire coming from the meter, my red and black tied in there, and my neutral. And as I've mentioned before, you know how we get silly color schemes depending on what's available sometimes at the ferreteria. So what we have here is going to the Casita. They only had white wire, so we've got two hots, one white, well, two whites actually, two whites for hots, and then a black for neutral. So it gets a little confusing when you look in this box and see two whites and a black coming in, and then two blacks and a white coming in, and then two whites and a black going to the Casita. So knowing that that's what we're dealing with, we just have to carry on and do what we got to do. So split bolts, I was impressed with the last guy that put these split bolts together because he wrapped them with plastic first before he taped them. That's because he's probably done this before and had to take a split bolt apart that's got sticky black tape all over it. It makes it very difficult to back off that split bolt. So the other trick, I didn't have any new plastic around, but the other trick to do is back wrap. So you just take your tape And your first pass around your split bolt, just do it backwards so the sticky side is out. And that way you don't have sticky guck all over your threads of your split bolts. So now I'm going to use some rubber tape and then some Scotch 33 plus tape, and I'm going to tape these connections up real good and watertight because we have had flooding in this area before. Okay, I got a bit of an awkward camera angle here, but hopefully you can see the numbers there. Let's check one hot to neutral, and we're having 117 volts. The other hot to neutral, 117 volts. Checking between the two hots, I can do right here, 234, that's all good. And then let's check, just for the fun of it, from a hot to the ground, same reading, about 117 volts. So let's turn on the breakers and give it a try. Okay, so I've got my work light plugged into the far receptacle. I'll check them all on the way back, but let's just turn on that breaker. And the light is on. Shut my switch off. Light goes off. That's a good thing. And my light is on. My work lamp that's plugged into the receptacle is also on. So I'll just check those receptacles all the way back and we've got a complete job. All right, so thanks again for watching. Terry Peterman, your internet electrician, coming to you from Guanacaste, Costa Rica. Little container job we just finished up. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The internet electrician, helping you do it right, do it safely, and save you some money.